What it do, what it do. You know what to do. Like, subscribe, share, comment to my YouTube channel. Most definitely hit that bell icon. That's a notification bell that alerts you and lets you know all content that I drop to my YouTube channel. So if you want the latest, you want the drop, you want the fresh, you want to be the first one to hear the content that I drop, make sure you smash that bell icon and it will instantly notify you and let you know when S.L.R drop the content. Also, make sure you hit the subscribe button. I need everybody to double back and spin the block. Go to my second YouTube channel, S.L.R Sports News TV. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, comment over there. It helps both of my channels grow, get more viewers, more subscribers. Pushes my channel further to the YouTube algorithm to get noticed. And plus, it's all free. So all you gotta do is smash that like button, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, and keep it going by your day. And also continue to support the channel. Like what I do, make sure you hit the cash out. The cash out information is pinned in at the top of the ticker. Also, if you're looking for the like button, it's the three dots on the right hand side. Smash the three dots on the upper right hand side, and you will see the like button. Shout out to my subscribers. Shout out to my future subscribers. You see the title. We in the building. We go another series, the War in Hip Hop. You know I had to bring it back. You know what I do. We always drop epics. We always drop great content. Anything that I do, what I drop is always gonna be great content, and the fans love the War in Hip Hop series. So you know I had to bring you back and bring you one. The War in Hip Hop, Nipsey Hussle. They say Nipsey Hussle was a rap legend. Was he? I don't really know. You know what I'm saying? We didn't went too big into the West Coast rap, but the last album he did before his demise, great album. Um, as I say again, truth is to be told, who knows? But it's a lot of speculation that's going around surrounded by his death. Some people saying that Big U had something to do with it. Some people saying that Snoop Dogg may have something to do with something. People say should not have some things. Who knows? But what we gonna do? We're gonna break it down, repackage it up, and ship it out accordingly. And that's exactly what we're gonna do. We're gonna get to the bottom of it. Nipsey Hussle. They say he was a rap legend, was taken too early by a guy named Eric Holder. So we're gonna break it down, we're gonna get into it. And like I said, we're gonna figure it out. Make sure you smash that like button, hit the subscribe button. We in the building. A War in Hip Hop series. Nipsey Hussle.
Nip shouldn't address that because Nip knew who he was.
We do walk amongst gods and we walk amongst angels, and we need to know that. And
newly uncovered footage of Snoop Dogg and Big U is raising serious questions about the real forces surrounding Nipsey Hussle before his murder. What they revealed, quietly, off camera, and long before the tragedy, completely reshapes the story the public was told.
Crippin' and Bloods making records, and y'all really love each other, and y'all bonding with each other, y'all pulling up together, you in they neighborhoods, you loving them and they loving you. You are a peace advocate, Nip.
Yet here's the painful truth. When a man becomes a symbol of unity, he also becomes a target from sides he understands and from sides he doesn't. And this is where the footage of Snoop and Big U becomes so unsettling. Because according to the new materials uncovered, Snoop, while speaking about Nip's legacy, makes statements that only make sense if he already knew Nipsey was dealing with pressure from people close to home. Statements that, when put next to Big U's comments about street politics, seem to suggest that Nipsey may have been dealing with growing tension from multiple directions at once. Let's establish the factual timeline first. Nipsey Hussle was murdered on March 31st, 2019. Immediately after, outlets everywhere reported the same straightforward narrative. Eric Holder was taken into police custody, as confirmed in the Hot 97 breaking news segment. The clip begins with this moment.
So, Nipsey Hussle's murder suspect, Eric Holder, was taken into police custody yesterday.
Can't believe Nipsey Hussle got murdered, guys.
Look at the tone. Disbelief, shock, devastation. Nobody could wrap their heads around how someone so deeply loved, so widely respected, could be taken out in the very community he uplifted. But as those first chaotic days unfolded, the public narrative hardened instantly. Holder acted alone, acted emotionally, and had a personal dispute with Nip. Hot 97 even outlined the alleged argument.
Nipsey says to you, don't be around here because we all know you're an informant, you're a snitch, I don't want you around here.
A conflict of ego, a reaction of anger, a tragic moment. But here's the part that never sat right with people close to Nipsey, and it becomes especially suspicious when viewed beside the newly surfaced footage of Snoop and Big U. In the interview with Big U, he makes a statement that challenges the entire narrative about the argument that supposedly triggered Nipsey's murder. He says it plainly.
Nip shouldn't address that because Nip knew who he was.
Right.
Like the nigga was they guy. Like he worked for Nip, grew up with Nip, and he really was he was the man. He was their guy.
Right.
He really was a shooter in the streets. And secondly, it ain't no paperwork on the man.
That's huge because it implies that not only was the alleged argument about snitching not consistent with street protocol, but that hip-hop media may have accepted the wrong explanation entirely. Now, here's where the new Snoop footage becomes jaw-dropping. In one clip recorded before Nipsey's passing, Snoop is seen discussing the deeper emotional and spiritual burden Nipsey carried behind the scenes. This wasn't the polished memorial speech. This was Snoop speaking candidly, unscripted, revealing how much Nip was trying to carry on his own shoulders and how much pressure was on him just for trying to be a positive force. And when you place Snoop's commentary next to Big U's comments about people pulling up on Nip, violating space, showing hostility, the pattern becomes unmistakable. The mainstream explanation for Nipsey's death was way too clean, too simple, too convenient, because as Big U himself pointed out,
that's where he meet the kids. That's where he greet the people. That's where he still stay grounded. You know what I mean? Like if he don't go there no more, he don't show up. He these other niggas, he leave LA and move somewhere else. He in Hollywood. He just took pictures with some little babies.
It wasn't just a random stop by when Nipsey went to the Marathon store. It was part of his daily mission to uplift the neighborhood. And this raises the most important question of all. If Nipsey Hussle was becoming a bridge between communities, who felt threatened by that? Now, enter the footage that this entire video revolves around. The newly surfaced clip shows Snoop Dogg and Big U in a moment of raw, unfiltered conversation, recorded long before the tragedy, but carrying a tone that sounds hauntingly prophetic in hindsight. In that footage, Snoop reflects on Nipsey's rise, explaining how he saw Nip evolving into a visionary far beyond his years. He even recalls how Nipsey encouraged him to dream bigger, so big that Snoop himself didn't fully grasp it at the time. Here's the clip.
One of the first conversations me and Nipsey had, he was talking to me about, hey, cuz, you need to do a amusement park, doggy land.
But here's the eerie part. Snoop explains that Nip had a vision, something massive, something generational. But that vision came with a burden Snoop explicitly recognized. Then, in the same period, Big U is speaking in another interview about the exact kind of street energy Nipsey was dealing with. The disrespect, the boundary violations, the people approaching Nip as if he owed them something, the danger of being too accessible. And when you look at the newly uncovered footage of Snoop and Big U standing together, speaking about Nipsey with a mixture of pride, worry, and recognition of his unique position, it becomes impossible to ignore the underlying tension. This isn't just two men reminiscing. This is two authority figures in the neighborhood ecosystem, both understanding that Nipsey's role was becoming bigger than anything the streets had seen in decades. It forces us to confront a disturbing question. Was Nipsey's rise creating silent fractures behind the scenes, fractures the public never knew about until now? And remember, after Nipsey's death, Snoop wasn't shy about expressing how extraordinary Nip's impact was. At his memorial, Snoop honored Nip with a level of love and admiration rarely seen in hip-hop.
Look at the love, look at the spirit.
But even at the memorial, Snoop let something slip, something most viewers never caught, a moment where he acknowledges Nip's spiritual weight and how unusual his presence was.
It's like a God, Mike, because we must know that we do walk amongst gods and we walk amongst angels, and we need to know that.
Why is that important? Because people with that kind of influence, that kind of presence, often face forces trying to suppress them long before the public sees it. And now, with the newly surfaced footage, the pieces are finally lined are finally lining up. We have Snoop expressing deep concern and admiration about Nip's role. Big U explaining that Nip was dealing with escalating pressure from people violating his space. Hot 97 confirming the suspect approached Nip in the same manner Big U described. Snoop acknowledging Nip's spiritual weight and the dangers that come with it. And when you stack all this together, it becomes impossible to ignore the cracks forming behind the scenes. The pressure Nipsey was under. And this is where the story becomes almost unbearable to examine, because once you understand the emotional and political forces stacked around Nipsey in those final years of his life, the emergence of a previously unseen conversation between Snoop Dogg and Big U takes on an entirely different meaning. It doesn't read like two OGs casually reflecting on a younger artist coming into his own. It reads like two men who were fully aware that Nipsey was walking a path that very few people survive, an intersection of leadership, independence, and community responsibility that historically places a target on anyone carrying that load. In the newly resurfaced clip, you can see a quiet seriousness in Snoop's body language, something that feels completely different from his usual relaxed demeanor. He talks about how Nipsey was building his own world, buying property, architecting infrastructure, creating opportunities, and lifting up people who had never been given a shot before. When Snoop mentions Nipsey's ability to build an entire doggy land for himself, his own customized environment, his own movement, it's not just a compliment, it's a recognition that Nip wasn't just becoming successful, he was becoming autonomous. Autonomy is powerful, autonomy is respected, but autonomy in the wrong environment can be dangerous, because autonomy means you no longer need the same gatekeepers. It means you create your own system, and not everybody wants to see that happen. This is exactly why Big U's commentary in the Drink Champs interview has become so important in hindsight. He described with absolute clarity how Nipsey's increased presence in the community created friction with people who felt entitled to proximity, respect, or favor. Nipsey didn't want to be distant. He didn't want to be inaccessible, and he certainly didn't want to be protected in a way that put a wall between him and the people he loved. Nipsey was grounded by his desire to keep showing up for his community, the exact people he grew up with, the exact streets that molded him. But that devotion came with a cost, and both Snoop and Big U seemed painfully aware of it. The newly surfaced footage captures a moment where Snoop discusses how Nipsey was always thinking bigger, even bigger than the people around him. Snoop describes Nipsey pushing him repeatedly, almost relentlessly, to think on a higher scale. He didn't want Snoop to settle for the usual or the expected. Nipsey was urging a full expansion, mentally, spiritually, entrepreneurially. This was not the mentality of someone who was casually successful. This was the mentality of someone preparing for a generational impact. But if Nipsey's rise looked that monumental to Snoop, someone who has seen literal decades of industry power plays, then imagine how overwhelming it must have felt to the people whose own influence started shrinking as Nipsey's grew. That's when the tension becomes clear, because Big U's commentary directly contradicts the mainstream narrative that Nipsey had outgrown the streets in a way that made him somehow immune to the politics. He makes it clear.
He don't never really leave the streets. Like, Nip, this is where he grew up at, this is where he lived, this is where his business was.
In other words, Nipsey wasn't above the politics. He was surrounded by them. This becomes even more chilling when you consider the Hot 97 discussion immediately after the murder, where the host described the suspect's reaction, his guilt, his shame, and the emotional volatility that supposedly triggered the violent act. In the broadcast, they say,
So you get emotional, you murder someone because of that.
But Big U's comments paint a different picture. He explains that the suspect had been a known figure in the neighborhood, someone who grew up around them, someone many people, including Nip, had interacted with for years. He even says,
he got killed by one of his own homeboys. Right. Well, at some point, he wasn't his homeboy.
Right. That distinction between homeboy and not homeboy is vital, because it shows that Big U wanted to push back on the idea that this was a simple emotional meltdown or a random snap. Instead, the situation was the result of a long simmering boundary violation, a presence that wasn't welcome, a tension that had already been acknowledged by the people close to Nipsey. And this is why the newly uncovered footage of Snoop and Big U matters so much, because if you slow it down, listen carefully, and compare it to every public interview either of them gave before and after the murder, you start noticing something unsettling. Neither of them ever described Nipsey's final years as peaceful. Neither ever suggested he was untouched by internal community politics. Neither ever implied that the situation was simple. Instead, they both, sometimes intentionally, sometimes accidentally, revealed that Nipsey was navigating a minefield. This becomes especially clear when you see Snoop's emotional tone in the memorial farewell speech. His voice cracks, his pacing slows, and he seems to struggle with the weight of what Nipsey represented. He wasn't just honoring a friend, he was mourning a leader whose presence carried a spiritual force. He said it directly.
We do walk amongst gods and we walk amongst angels, and we need to know that.
Snoop was acknowledging the kind of pressure only a chosen few ever carry. And if Nip was truly walking in a godlike purpose, as Snoop framed it, then his visibility, influence, and moral direction wouldn't just inspire people, they would intimidate them. Now let's return to Big U's explanation of the street dynamics. He said something that feels almost prophetic.
I mean, it's a farce to think that violence ain't gonna follow you wherever it is.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's gonna follow you wherever it's gonna follow you.
That comment alone becomes heavy when viewed after Nipsey's death, because it sounds like something said by someone who already knew how dangerous the environment truly was. Someone who knew that even a man as respected as Nipsey wasn't exempt from danger. This is where the resurfaced Snoop and Big U footage becomes so emotionally charged. It captures them speaking in a tone that feels almost like preparation for something they sensed but couldn't say out loud. They talk about Nipsey's leadership, his influence, his unity building, and his ability to bridge gangs and neighborhoods that had been separated for generations. But here's the detail that stands out the most. Snoop didn't just talk about Nipsey as a rising star. He talked about him as a superhero figure, someone whose movement required constant protection, constant awareness, constant vigilance. Even Hot 97 said,
Nipsey really was doing it, like hands on the ground doing it,
And
for
understood
real.
the struggle.
Really in it though. He didn't just rap about the struggle.
when multiple people in positions of influence independently describe Nipsey in those terms, superhero, godlike, leader, teacher, it becomes clear that Nipsey was breaking the mold. And whenever someone breaks the mold, the resistance grows in equal measure. This brings us back to the most critical element of the newly surfaced footage. In the Snoop and Big U clip, there is a moment only a few seconds long where the energy shifts. Snoop mentions how Nipsey's mindset was stronger than a rapper that's been in the game for 15 years. You can see the seriousness in Snoop's expression. You can see Big U nodding quietly. You can feel that they both understood something deeper about Nipsey's pressure, because when someone thinks like that, moves like that, leads like that, they don't just become artists, they become demigods in their community. And every demigod has enemies. This is what the public never understood. This is what the media didn't show. When you watch the clip, Snoop and Big U aren't smiling. They're reflecting with a level of gravity that only makes sense in hindsight. It's as if they knew Nipsey was carrying more than anyone realized. And what becomes even more disturbing is that this private tone, this seriousness, this heaviness, matches the subtle hints both men dropped publicly. In Big U's interview, he mentions someone approaching him the day before Nipsey died, confronting him about similar accusations of being a rat. He recalls,
Dude came up to me in a restaurant. I was trapped, and he looked, he felt it. He said, "I'm gonna let you know right now. People saying I'm a rat." And I was like, "Oh shit!" Like I didn't want to have this conversation, and like he just said it straight out. And I was like, "Oh shit!" He addressed me, so I didn't have to address him. But I thought. immediately when that happened the next day.
That interaction mirrored exactly what Nipsey reportedly told Holder. The same confrontation, the same accusation, the same tension, only one day apart. And this is where everything shifts. Because once you understand how these pieces align, the contradictions between narratives, the emotional weight on Nip, the spiritual language Snoop used, the street dynamics Big U described, it becomes impossible to avoid the obvious. This wasn't just a tragedy, a storm that everybody around Nipsey saw forming, but nobody could stop. The chilling clip that exposed the truth about Nipsey's final days. And now we arrive at the moment everything has been building toward, the moment that forced journalists, fans, and even former associates of Nipsey Hussle to stop, rewind, and replay the footage again and again. Because once you see this clip of Snoop Dogg and Big U together, filmed quietly before Nipsey's death, it becomes impossible to deny a chilling truth. They were both speaking like men who already sensed a threat circling Nipsey long before the world ever heard the name Eric Holder. The footage doesn't begin dramatically. There's no argument, no raised voices, no theatrics. It starts almost casually, like two veterans reflecting on a rising star. But as the conversation deepens, the tone shifts. Snoop leans in. Big U pauses longer than usual before answering. Their eyes don't match the relaxed body language they're trying to project. And when Nipsey's name comes up, something in the room changes completely. Something heavy, something unsaid, something unmistakably tense. In the resurfaced clip, Snoop begins talking about Nipsey's mindset. Not the music, not the fame, not the public image, but the burden. He describes how Nipsey was navigating levels that don't exist for most artists. He explains how Nip's decisions were never simple because every move, no matter how positive, had political consequences in the streets, in the industry, and even among people Nip considered family. If you listen closely, you can hear Snoop mention something that wasn't in any memorial speech, wasn't in any interview he gave after the murder, and wasn't included in any documentary about Nipsey. He describes Nipsey as fighting battles most people couldn't even see. That one phrase became the spark that sent viewers into a frenzy when the footage resurfaced. Because when you put that statement next to Big U's Drink Champ's explanation of Nipsey's environment, the puzzle finally starts to assemble itself. Big U's explanation in that interview was blunt.
Violence ain't gonna follow you wherever it is.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's gonna follow you wherever it's gonna follow you.
That idea that violence moves with you regardless of your growth takes on a deeper meaning when viewed alongside Snoop's concern. Because in the footage, Snoop doesn't talk about Nipsey like a peer. He talks about him like a younger brother he wished he could protect. The softness in his voice, the way he keeps his hands folded, the way he stares off between sentences, it's the body language of someone who knows something is wrong, but can't say it out loud. Meanwhile, Big U's presence in the clip is even more striking. He isn't animated. He isn't storytelling. He isn't laughing. He's focused, too focused. It's the demeanor of someone who understands that the more you elevate, the more you risk, and that success doesn't erase old tensions, it magnifies them. The moment that viewers flagged most intensely comes about halfway into the clip. Snoop says Nipsey had a mindset stronger than rappers who had been in the game for 15 years, something he also expressed during his memorial tribute.
Nip mentality was stronger than a rapper that's been in the game for 15 years.
But in the resurfaced footage, when he says this line, he doesn't smile. He looks worried. As soon as Snoop finishes speaking, the camera briefly pans to Big U, who gives a slow, almost reluctant nod, like someone confirming something he wishes weren't true. Then Big U adds a line that, when placed next to the events that followed, feels almost prophetic. He says something to the effect of, "A man like that got a lot of weight on him." It isn't dramatic, it isn't loud, it's just honest, but the heaviness in his tone matches the same seriousness he showed on Drink Champs when describing Nipsey's situation at the Marathon store. He explained that Nip was dealing with people pulling up on him with energy that didn't belong there.
If you know y'all not rocking, why you pull up in my space?
If you connect those two pieces, the weight Snoop described and the pressure Big U confirmed, the pattern crystallizes. Nipsey wasn't threatened because he was weak. He was threatened because he was strong. He wasn't a target because he failed. He was a target because he succeeded in ways that disrupted the old order. This is exactly why the footage changes everything, because it reveals that Nipsey's closest elders, his mentors, his older brothers, were already concerned about the energy surrounding him. They weren't predicting his death, but they were acknowledging a level of tension, conflict, and invisible pressure that the public had no access to. The resurfaced footage becomes even more haunting when you compare it to the Hot 97 broadcast from the day the murder suspect was captured. The hosts expressed disbelief that Nipsey could be taken out by someone so close to home, someone from the same neighborhood, someone he'd grown up around. They said,
"You just murdered a beloved human being in the neighborhood where you guys grew up, in daylight."
But what Hot 97 described as unthinkable, Big U had already described as predictable in his interview. He explained that Nipsey refused to abandon his community. He refused to move to Hollywood. He refused to act too big for his people. That loyalty, while admirable, also created opportunity for danger. The same crowd that adored him was the same crowd that contained those who resented him. This internal conflict is exactly what the resurfaced footage captures without ever naming directly. The pauses, the lowered voices, the nervous glances, the choice of words, all of it communicates one message. Nipsey was navigating a reality more dangerous than anyone knew. Snoop's tone in the clip is especially heartbreaking because it mirrors the emotional weight he displayed at the memorial. When he addressed Nipsey's father, mother, and children, his voice cracked repeatedly. During the memorial speech, he said,
I know what he is, I know what he was.
That line takes on a darker meaning once you've seen the resurfaced clip, because when Snoop speaks those words in the footage, years before the murder, he speaks them with the same sorrow in his eyes. It's the sorrow of someone who recognizes both the beauty and the risk in Nip's mission. When Snoop uses spiritual language like that, he isn't being poetic, he's being honest about the burden Nipsey carried. And when someone becomes a godlike figure in their neighborhood, they inspire love, loyalty, fear, jealousy, admiration, resentment, and desperation, all at the same time. This is the emotional truth that the resurfaced Snoop and Big U footage exposes. Nipsey Hussle wasn't taken from this world because he was reckless or unprotected. He was taken because he represented a level of power, unity, and transformation that few communities have ever seen. And those forces, positive and negative, were already pressing in from every side. The footage ends in a way that feels almost scripted by fate. Snoop mentions that Nipsey was always building, always planning, always trying to push everyone around him to think bigger. This echoes his memorial speech where he said,
He built his own world. He built his own thing that people from around the world is starting to come to, take pictures of, stand in front of, immortalize this man.
Big U, sitting beside him in the resurfaced clip, nods quietly, but his eyes don't match the nod. They look tired, almost pained. And when the clip ends, you're left with the overwhelming sense that these two men, who both loved Nipsey in their own ways, were already bracing themselves for the possibility that his path would not be easy. That's why this clip changes everything. It doesn't rewrite the facts of the murder. It rewrites the understanding of the environment that surrounded Nipsey. It reveals the quiet warning signs, the subtle concerns, the emotional forecasts that his elders recognized long before the tragedy. It shows that the people closest to him understood the risks, even if they couldn't identify the exact moment those risks would explode. Nipsey Hussle walked a path that few men have ever walked, and the resurfaced footage of Snoop Dogg and Big U, recorded long before the tragedy, proves that they both saw the weight he was carrying and feared what that weight could one day cost. Well, that's it for this video, but don't go anywhere because we've got plenty more heat for you. Just tap any of the cards on your screen right now and Nipsey was building a real estate empire in South Central. He wasn't buying houses in Beverly Hills. He was buying the very blocks he grew up on, determined to transform them into safe havens for the next generation. He was investing in tech startup, pushing for STEM programs for kids in the hood, and creating opportunities that would outlive any record deal. He spoke often about wanting to be more than a rapper. He wanted to be a mogul, someone who could shift the balance of power in hip-hop away from the corporations and back into the hands of the artists. Other rappers didn't see Nipsey as competition. They saw him as a leader. They saw him clearing the path, making it easier for the next wave to build ownership and independence. With Nipsey alive, the West Coast had not just a star, but a visionary capable of reshaping the entire industry. With him gone, that momentum was cut short. The marathon, his clothing brand, and his message still live on, but the full scope of what Nipsey could have achieved was stolen the moment those shots rang out in front of his store. That's why Nipsey's death hit so hard. It wasn't just about losing a man, it was about losing a future. Fans saw him as a symbol of hope. Artists saw him as a blueprint for independence. Community saw him as proof that someone could rise up from the hood and bring everyone else with him. And when that was taken away, it felt like the system had won again. The same old story, a visionary cut down just as he was about to change the game. But if there's one thing Nipsey always said, it's that the marathon continues. And in the wake of his death, those words became a rallying cry. Murals, tattoos, social media posts, songs, and movements, all dedicated to keeping Nipsey's vision alive. Still, no tribute, no mural, no hashtag can erase the pain of knowing what was lost. Nipsey Hussle wasn't just another rapper. He was a leader, a teacher, a father, and a businessman. And his death wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was a cultural robbery. But here's the most painful twist. As fans mourned and artists pledged to carry on Nipsey's legacy, whispers began to spread that maybe this wasn't just another senseless act of violence. Maybe it wasn't just Eric Holder pulling the trigger. Maybe the people closest to Nipsey, the ones who should should have protected him were the ones holding the door open for his enemies. That's why fans today aren't just grieving Nipsey's death. They're angry. Angry at the idea that someone like Diddy, with his endless influence and power, could have pulled strings behind the scenes. Angry at the suggestion that Lauren London, the woman who stood on stage and sobbed for Nipsey, might have been closer to Diddy than anyone realized. And angry at Snoop Dogg, Nipsey's so-called brother, who always seems to show up at the center of these tragedies with a eulogy on his lips but questions hanging over his loyalty. The grief of losing Nipsey turned into suspicion. Suspicion turned into outrage. And outrage turned into a demand for answers. Fans are not content with Eric Holder did it anymore. They see the bigger picture. Nipsey wasn't just murdered by a man. He was silenced by a system of power, greed, betrayal, and manipulation. And the more you connect the dots, the footage of Snoop and Lauren looking too close, the tapes allegedly tying Lauren to Diddy's world, Snoop's history of betrayal with Tupac and Biggie, the more you realize that Nipsey's death wasn't the end of the marathon. It was the start of a much darker race. Because what the fans and artists lost wasn't just Nipsey, it was the future he was building for them. And the hardest pill to swallow, that future may have been stolen not by strangers, but by the very people who stood closest to him. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to check out more amazing content on our channel. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one.
Did you get some of that good Snoop weed?
I've smoked with Unc before, yeah.
That was Lauren admitting she was close with Snoop. And at first everyone thought it was just a normal friendship. But now, new footage of Snoop and Lauren together is raising eyebrows. Some people believe it confirms a hidden connection, maybe even that she played a role in setting him up. Let me break it down. Snoop and Lauren London, new footage. That's all it took to send the entire hip-hop community into a frenzy. Footage that doesn't just show Snoop Dogg smiling for the cameras or doing one of his laid-back Uncle Snoop skits, but footage that puts him side by side with none other than Lauren London, Nipsey Hussle's longtime partner, in the aftermath of Nipsey's murder. You see, Lauren London is why people reacted the way they did. You need to step back to the moment Nipsey was killed. When those shots rang out in front of the Marathon store, Los Angeles didn't just would face consequences.
That disrespect, bro. You better smack. Ain't nobody disrespected, bro.
These weren't empty words. They were a warning shot. Sam knew vultures would circle. He knew opportunists would move in. And he wasn't about to let Nipsey's empire become a feeding ground. But here's where things got messy. Nipsey's empire wasn't just built on contracts and businesses. It was built on relationships. And relationships are fragile. Even among Nipsey's closest people, fractures appeared. Brick Baby admitted that he and Black Sam had their own clash after Nipsey's death. And the fight was about loyalty.
It basically was like, you rocking with him? Like, you rocking with him? I'm rocking with my brother.
This is what Nipsey's loss did. It forced people to pick sides. It made every alliance suspect. It turned grief into suspicion. And then came Charleston White's explosive claim. He said the truth nobody wanted to admit out loud. Nipsey was killed not just by one man, but by the jealousy of his own set.
All the big homies in the set was jealous of Nip, because all the young men Nip. Nip got bigger than the program, so Nip got clipped because Nip.
Think about what that means. If Nipsey was clipped because he rose too high, then his empire wasn't just under attack from the outside, it was under siege from the inside. And this is where the industry enters. Because while the family fought for control and the streets wrestled with jealousy, the music industry saw opportunity. Nipsey had cracked a code. He owned his masters. He owned his brand. He owned his block. Independence was his crown jewel. And in an industry built act. By standing beside Lauren, Snoop gained proximity to Nipsey's memory. By gaining proximity, he gained credibility. And by gaining credibility, he strengthened his own position as the elder statesman of the West Coast. To some, it was natural. To others, it was predatory. But in both cases, the outcome was the same. The footage became a symbol of the larger battle for Nipsey's throne. And make no mistake, there was a throne. If you believed what Suge said earlier about Snoop, then you'd understand that Nipsey wasn't just taken out by a lone gunman. He was weakened, destabilized, and left vulnerable by forces bigger than the neighborhood. And who else did Suge accuse of playing both sides? Snoop Dogg. That's why the footage hit harder than anyone expected. It wasn't about what was literally happening in the clip. It was about what it represented. To the family, it looked like outsiders stepping in. To the streets, it looked like power shifting. To the industry, it looked like an opportunity. And to the fans, it looked like confirmation of every suspicion they'd been whispering since 2019. And of course, why wouldn't fans be suspicious? Everyone knows exactly who Snoop is. Snoop's history of betrayal. Tupac Shakur, one of the miles away from from someone like that, not Snoop. He worked with Big Dre on a mixtape after Tupac died. When Tupac died in 1996, Snoop was in a complicated position. Their relationship had been strained in Pac's final days, but after the death, Snoop emerged as one of Pac's loudest mourners, aligning himself with the tragedy as well as the person linked to it, and reshaping his image in the process. Let that sink in. Your brother is murdered. The suspects are still in plain sight. And instead of distancing yourself, you're cutting records with them. That's not loyalty. That's betrayal. And Snoop's betrayal of Pac didn't stop there. He's been caught over and over embellishing stories about Pac, sometimes twisting the truth, other times outright fabricating events. For example, he once claimed Tupac was the one who introduced him to blunts. Sounds like a cool story, right? Except the math doesn't add up. Cameron Diaz herself admitted she used to buy weed from Snoop back in high school, which means Snoop had been deep in that lifestyle long before Pac came around. So why lie? Why create this fake bond with Tupac after the fact? The answer is image, legacy. Snoop knows the public loves to see him as part of Pac's inner circle, so he rewrites history to fit that narrative. Napoleon from Tupac's own Outlaws crew called him out on this. That's a false narrative. Pac wasn't disliked in prison, he was respected. Snoop just made that up. Even Nas got dragged into Snoop's web of lies. Snoop once told a story about Tupac confronting Nas at the 1996 VMAs, claiming Nas rolled up with 100 shooters and Pac was reckless. But according to Napoleon, who was actually there, that showdown never happened the way Snoop described. In reality, Pac and Nas handled it like gentlemen, squashing any misunderstanding on the spot. Nas himself confirmed Snoop's version was nonsense. So again, the pattern: create myths after someone dies, position yourself as their brother, and distract people from the fact that your actions while they were alive told a different story. Now let's talk about Biggie. Snoop has often painted himself as being close to Biggie, especially after Tupac's death. He's told stories of heartfelt conversations, moments of peace and respect between them. But according to Gene Deal, Diddy's former bodyguard, that's all media spin.
But yet still, Big came out to California, and you don't see not one picture of him and Snoop together. You don't see not one place where they smoked a blunt together. Both of them like to smoke. We was in the studio with Bone Thugs and Harmony. Snoop never came over there. So you tell me, was they really that cool? Or was it just a facade that was put up?
Gene Deal questioned why, if Snoop and Biggie were so close, they never hung out when Biggie was in LA. But somehow Snoop claims he saw Biggie in Atlanta after Pac's death. Come on, man. Once again, the narrative doesn't match the reality. Which brings us right back to Nipsey Hussle. Because if you're seeing the pattern, you already know what happened next.
Man, I just want to send prayers out to Nipsey Hussle, his family, to Lauren London and her family. It's up, man.
Nipsey dies. Snoop cries. Snoop calls him my dear brother and more. Then he drops a tribute record. He tells the world Nipsey was the new Snoop, and fans, in their grief, eat it up. But when you look closer, you start seeing the cracks. Snoop mourned Nipsey, yes, but he was also caught hanging out with Big U, the very man Nipsey warned others about. Nipsey had a diss track aimed directly at Big U, making it clear he didn't want to be controlled or extorted. Everybody knows Big U was shaking Nipsey down, making him pay protection fees. When Nipsey stopped paying, he ended up dead. And yet Snoop enjoyed Big U's company. So once again, history repeats, just like with Tupac, just like with Biggie. When the legend is alive, Snoop aligns with their enemies. When the legend is gone, Snoop steps forward to rewrite the story, putting himself at the center as the grieving brother. This is why Nipsey's death can no longer be looked at as a random hit. Eric Holder may have pulled the trigger, but Eric Holder didn't orchestrate the play. There were bigger forces, hidden hands, people with more to lose if Nipsey succeeded. And thanks to these leaks, it looks like Snoop is now confirming what the streets have always whispered. Lauren London wasn't just caught in the middle. She might have been on the inside all along. Towards the end of Nipsey's life, he started distancing himself from certain industry events, refusing to check in or play the extortion games. If only Nipsey had realized the friend by his side had connections to the very forces he was trying to escape, maybe things would have been different. Because if there's one thing Snoop has proven time and time again, it's that he knows how to survive. The ripple effect of Nipsey's death. When Nipsey Hussle was murdered on March 31st, 2019, it wasn't just another tragic headline in the hip-hop world. It was an earthquake that shattered millions of lives, sending shockwaves through music, culture, and communities around the world. For many, Nipsey wasn't just an artist they listened to in the car or streamed on Spotify. He was a living, breathing example of possibility. He stood as proof that you could come from nothing, rise above the chaos of the streets, and build something lasting without selling out to the system. Fans loved him not only because of his music, but because he lived what he rapped. He didn't just spit verses about ownership, he owned his masters. He didn't just talk about reinvesting in the hood, he built businesses in Crenshaw and gave jobs to people who had been written off by society. And he didn't just rap about loyalty, he stood by his community even after fame and money gave him every chance to leave it behind. So when the news broke that Nipsey had been gunned down in front of his own Marathon store, a place that had become a symbol of his vision, the reaction was raw, immediate, and overwhelming.
It's crazy how the streets don't love it, but we still be loving the streets and shit.
In Los Angeles, people flooded the streets. Outside the Marathon, crowds gathered, leaving flowers, candles, handwritten letters, and murals. People cried openly, hugging strangers, because they all felt like they had lost a family member. And in a way, they had. Nipsey had been the voice of South Central, but his reach stretched across the world. Murals appeared not only in Los Angeles, but in cities across the country, from Houston to New York to Chicago. Even overseas, from London to Lagos, people painted Nipsey's face on walls, declaring that the marathon continues. Social media lit up with tributes, hashtags, and emotional posts. For weeks, it felt like the entire culture had stopped to grieve. Fans weren't just mourning the man, they were mourning what he stood for. They looked at Nipsey and saw a blueprint for a better future. He was proof that you could turn your back on the industry's tricks, hold on to your independence, and still thrive. His death left people asking a painful question. If someone like Nipsey, someone building businesses, helping his people, staying true to himself, could be struck down like this, what hope was left? Nipsey's death didn't just devastate fans, it devastated the very artists who had grown up watching it. For younger rappers, Nipsey wasn't just a peer, he was a mentor, a big brother, a living example of how to navigate the industry without losing yourself. Roddy Ricch has said openly that Nipsey's support helped him break into the mainstream. Nipsey gave him advice, co-signed his talent, and pushed him to believe that he could achieve more. For Roddy, losing Nipsey wasn't just losing a collaborator, it was losing a guiding light. YG, Nipsey's closest collaborator, broke down in public after the murder. He admitted he had lost more than a partner, he lost his brother. Their joint track, Last Time That I Checked, had become an anthem. But beyond the music, they were two men who wanted to change the streets they came from. YG said Nipsey made him think bigger, look beyond fame, and build something that would last. With Nipsey gone, YG confessed it felt like part of his vision had died too. Even heavyweights like Kendrick Lamar and Jay-Z made it clear that Nipsey's impact went far beyond music. Kendrick, known for his own conscious lyricism, saluted Nipsey as someone who represented the best of Los Angeles, gritty, independent, visionary. Jay-Z went even further, quietly setting up a trust fund for Nipsey's children, Imani and Cross, ensuring that the legacy Nipsey left behind would not die with him. That move alone spoke volumes about how deeply Nipsey was respected by the highest levels of hip-hop. Nipsey's reach even extended into athletes, actors, and politicians. LeBron James called him an inspiration. Barack Obama sent a letter to Nipsey's memorial praising him for his commitment to his community. That's how powerful Nipsey's presence was. He wasn't just a rapper, he was a leader who crossed cultural lines. And perhaps the most devastating part, Nipsey was only just beginning. His album Victory Lap had finally cemented him as a Grammy-nominated star. It was the project he had spent years perfecting, and it proved he could succeed on his own terms. But Victory Lap was just the beginning of what Nipsey had planned. Behind the scenes, Nipsey
A shooting spree has left rapper and entrepreneur
Nipsey was bringing artists from rival gang affiliations into their neighborhood for business purposes. In LA gang culture, this type of cross-pollination requires careful negotiation and respect for territorial boundaries. The fact that Nipsey was making these moves without consulting certain power brokers, without paying the proper tribute or showing the expected deference, was seen as a direct challenge to established hierarchies. Now here's where the conspiracy gets really deep. And this is some information that should make every real dude in the streets pay attention. According to multiple sources, the security failures at the marathon weren't accidental. The suggestion is that Big U could have paid people at the location to ensure that security protocols wouldn't be followed that day, essentially setting Nipsey up to be vulnerable when Eric Holder arrived. Think about the logistics required to make this happen. You would need inside information about normal security procedures. You would need to ensure that key personnel were absent or distracted, and you would need to coordinate timing so that the hit could happen during a window of vulnerability. This ain't something that happens by accident. This requires planning, coordination, and inside knowledge. The same source makes a crucial point about the systematic nature of these failures. There's no way a spot like the Marathon should have been without armed security, especially when Nipsey was present. Every real dude in LA immediately recognized this as suspicious because they understand how these operations typically work. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. And this is some information that reveals just how deep this conspiracy might go. After Eric Holder committed the murder, his entire family was reportedly killed within hours. We're talking about his mother, grandmother, and other relatives, all found dead in what was supposedly retaliation for Nipsey's murder. Now this is where the street logic gets interesting. The LA source makes a crucial observation about this family massacre. If Big U or any other power broker had actually orchestrated Nipsey's murder using Eric Holder as the shooter, the first thing you would do is protect Holder's family to ensure his silence. You don't eliminate your own assets' family members because that just gives them motivation to snitch or retaliate. The fact that Holder's family was wiped out so quickly suggests one of two possibilities. Either this was genuine retaliation by people seeking justice for Nipsey, or it was a calculated move to eliminate anyone who might have information about who really ordered the hit. Either way, it raises serious questions about whether Eric Holder was just a disposable pawn in a larger game. This brings us to the sophisticated nature of Holder's attack strategy, which doesn't match up with the profile of someone who was supposedly acting purely on emotional impulse. The red shirt misdirection, the reconnaissance mission, the tactical approach through the alley. This level of planning suggests either that Holder was much more capable than anyone gave him credit for, or that he had professional guidance. As Black Sam pointed out, the choice to wear red in Crip territory wasn't random. It was strategic psychological warfare designed to make the shooting appear gang-related rather than what it really was. But how does someone with reported mental health issues and limited street credibility come up with this type of sophisticated misdirection? The timeline leading up to the murder also reveals some interesting coincidences. We know that there were significant tensions around the DJ Khaled video shoot that had taken place just days before the murder. Black Sam revealed that there were serious political issues involved in getting Khaled safely in and out of the neighborhood, with certain people expressing displeasure about Nipsey bringing high-profile collaborators into their territory. This reveals that just hours before his death, Nipsey and his crew were dealing with serious political tensions related to his business moves and high-profile collaborations. The fact that they were having long talks about security and street politics shows they were aware of potential threats from within their own community, threats that were way more dangerous than anything Eric Holder represented by himself. The Dr. Sebi documentary Conspiracy adds another layer of complexity to this whole situation. Multiple sources have suggested that Nipsey was working on a documentary about Dr. Sebi and his claims about natural health remedies that could cure major diseases. While there's no concrete proof that this documentary work was directly connected to his murder, the timing is suspicious. But let's get back to the street level conspiracy, because that's where the real evidence lies. The systematic failure of law enforcement response raises some serious red flags about who might have been protecting certain interests. Reports indicate that when Holder's female companion initially tried to turn herself in, she was turned away by police, which led to an internal affairs investigation. The community impact of Nipsey's death provides another clue about the true nature of this crime.
Our community right now, we lost everything. Everything we wait for, one person took that person in our community. Thousands of jobs we don't have no more. Homies don't have nothing to do. They backslide, they rob people now. We had stuff to do. Now they don't have nothing to do. All our stores are closed down. We rely on jobs.
Who benefits from this level of systematic destruction? Who would want to see a successful, independent black entrepreneur eliminated along with all the economic opportunity he was creating for his community? These are the questions that should have investigators looking beyond Eric Holder to the puppet masters who might have been pulling his strings. The most damning evidence that this wasn't a simple crime of passion comes from examining Eric Holder's behavior after the shooting. Multiple sources confirmed that Holder turned himself in at a mental health facility 2 days later, claiming he needed psychiatric help. But if you just committed murder in the heat of passion, why would your first instinct be to seek mental health treatment rather than flee or hide? This behavior suggests that Holder was either genuinely having a breakdown after realizing what he'd done, or he was following a predetermined plan that included establishing a mental health defense. Given the sophisticated planning that went into the attack itself, the latter possibility can't be dismissed. The trial proceedings also raised questions about whether justice was truly served. The prosecution relied heavily on testimony from Holder's female companion who was granted immunity. The defense strategy was also interesting. Rather than arguing that Holder didn't commit the shooting, which would have been impossible given the evidence, they focused on mental health issues and tried to reduce the charges from first-degree murder to manslaughter. Aaron Jansen argued that the killing occurred in the heat of passion rather than being premeditated. The 60-year sentence that Holder ultimately received effectively ensures that he'll never be free to tell his story. He won't even be eligible for parole until he served 51 years, which means by the time he could potentially be released, everyone involved in any conspiracy will likely be dead. Black Sam's decision to distance himself from many people who were around Nipsey suggests that he has his own suspicions about who can and can't be trusted. The fact that he won't authorize certain projects or allow specific people to use Nipsey's likeness indicates that he believes there are individuals trying to profit from his brother's death who may have been involved in causing it. The speed with which Nipsey's entire operation collapsed after his death also raises questions. Within months, the Marathon store was closed, multiple businesses were shut down, and thousands of jobs were eliminated. Was this collapse natural, or was it engineered by people who understood exactly which pressure points to hit to ensure maximum damage? But perhaps the most chilling aspect of this entire conspiracy is how quickly the narrative was controlled and shaped to prevent deeper investigation. Within hours of the shooting, the story became focused on a snitching accusation that, as we now know, never actually happened. This false narrative served multiple purposes. It made the murder seem like typical street drama rather than a targeted assassination, and it shifted blame onto Nipsey himself for supposedly provoking the attack. Like this video? Click on the card showing on your screen for more.
A shooting spree has left rapper and entrepreneur Nipsey Hussle lying dead in a pool of blood in the parking lot near his South LA Marathon clothing store.
This guy just kept shooting one hand after another until he emptied his guns. I think he fired a total of 12 shots.
The carnage happened in a matter of minutes, ignited by a conversation between Eric Holder and Nipsey, with Holder's female friend within earshot. After they talk, Holder heads back to pick up his order at the burger joint.
And I noticed he looks uncomfortable when he goes back in that Master Burger.
A shirtless Holder paces, seeming agitated.
And came out, said bye to the people, including Nipsey Hussle that was in the area. Got into the car, drove around the corner, exited the vehicle, walked back into the through the alley and back towards the restaurant. At this point, he's wearing a red t-shirt.
He kind of casually walked right up to within 1 foot of Nipsey, pulled out not one but 2 guns, and started shooting.
And there's one final insult as Nipsey lies dying on the ground.
He ran up to Nipsey Hussle, kicked him in the head, and then ran back to the white vehicle that was waiting, told the driver, "You don't drive, I'll slap you."
Nipsey is hit 11 times, shot dead at age 33. But why?
My friend, am I doing this? Look!
LAPD officers arrive almost instantly as an attempt to save the rapper is underway.
Stop. 7, 8, 9.
Nipsey's brother, known as Black Sam, had been performing CPR until paramedics arrive.
You see him there resuscitating or attempting to resuscitate his little brother, his business partner, his everything. And I don't think any of us can imagine what type of pain Black Sam is going through. I try to imagine it, but I can't. My brothers are still alive. I can't even imagine what Black Sam is, and can't no one imagine that, because even if you lost a brother, were you there trying to resuscitate your own brother?
2 other men caught in the crossfire also get help.
Here's a bullet that hit me right there. He got hit. He got hit in the back.
Nipsey is loaded onto an ambulance. Horrified residents watch. First responders rush him to an area hospital, but it's far too late. He's pronounced dead on arrival. Word quickly spreads online. Rapper and activist Nipsey Hussle is gone. Fans gather outside Nipsey's store in a massive outpouring.
Nipsey Hussle he's really from the hood. And the stories that he talked through his music is about the hood that a lot of people from the hood can relate to.
Tributes pour in from LA leaders and music royalty. Then City Council President Herb Wesson tweeting, he inspired so many people and loved the community he came from. Rihanna tweets, "Dear God, may his spirit rest in peace." Days later, friends and fans fill the parking lot of the strip mall for a vigil, the exact spot where the father of two was gunned down. The frenzy brings police and riot gear, who order the crowd to disperse. A neighborhood on edge facing regular gang violence.
Whether it's Hispanic, white, black, Asian, it's all senseless crime, but it's a very common thing to occur in these neighborhoods that are infested with gangs.
But after the shock of his death settles, homicide detectives get to work.
We pull surveillance footage from the restaurant, from the adjacent gas station, and some other locations surrounding that particular area.
The videos are a gold mine and eventually help tell the whole story. Their only suspect, Eric Holder.
You could see the people who were witnesses to the crime inside of the parking lot. That was very helpful to us because we could interview those people or go locate those people or try to interview those people and see if we could actually get a meaning to why Nipsey Hussle was killed.
Police learned Nipsey and Eric grew up in the same South LA neighborhood and were once friendly.
Something occurred and the two broke up their friendship. It's been rumored that Nipsey and Eric were going to do music together, and then Nipsey took off on his own and did his own thing, so Eric was mad about it.
Investigators learned both men have rolling 60s ties. Detectives already know Crip-on-Crip violence happens regularly.
There's a common saying that you're not a 60 until you kill a 60.
But witnesses at the scene tell detectives that specific words exchanged outside Nipsey's store may have set Holder off enough to kill.
According to one witness, who was a female, she thought that she heard the word snitching. She didn't know if it was made about Nipsey Hussle or if it was made about Eric Holder, but she's under the impression that they were talking about snitching and thought that someone was being accused of snitching.
Among gangs, snitching is the ultimate sin.
Gang members commit a lot of crime. They rely on each other to keep each other's secrets. So it was believed in the neighborhood, or what they call word on the street, rumor if you will, that Eric has snitched on somebody.
But now Eric Holder is nowhere to be found. As police share a photo of the wanted man across news channels, the woman who drove the getaway car turns herself in and starts talking.
I'm not the messy type. I'm just like kind of like listening.
Make sure you like, subscribe, share, comment to my YouTube channel. As I said again, we most definitely broke it down. Did Big U play a part in Nipsey Hussle demise? Did Snoop play a part? Was Suge Knight telling the truth about Nipsey Hussle and Big U? We most definitely gonna break the story down more. Rest in peace to Nipsey Hussle, the Marathon, Black Sam, Lauren London. Your legacy continues. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, comment to my YouTube channel. You know what to do. Hit the subscribe button, hit that cash out. Make sure you smash that like button. Let's get 50 to 100 likes on this. Like, subscribe, share, comment to my YouTube channel. You know what to do. Subscribe. I'm out. Peace.